this will be a budget for working people. A budget that sets out a plan for Britain for the next 5 years to keep moving us from a low-wage, high-tax, high-welfare economy to the higher-wage, lower-tax, lower-welfare country we intend to create.
George Osborne has just delivered the first all-Conservative budget since way back in 1996. Freed from the constraints of working in coalition government with the Liberal Democrats, Mr Osborne used the summer budget to cut welfare while raising the minimum wage.
Well, George Osborne used quite an interesting phrase to describe this budget. He called it a one-nation budget. And if that sounds familiar, well, it is an old Conservative catchphrase, but it was also the slogan that Ed Miliband used to rebrand his Labour Party a couple of years ago. And in a lot of ways, this was George Osborne looking quite a lot like Ed Miliband. He cut back on tax credits and he told companies, you have to pick up on the slack. Instead, you have to pay a living wage of £9 an hour by 2020. That is essentially moving the burden of low pay away from the state onto private companies. That's something that Miliband talked about a lot. The question is whether the living wage is really a living wage. What we really mean by that is a living wage is supposed to be enough for people to get by on. That is calculated at the moment as around, it will be £9 an hour-ish by 2020, but that includes the effect of tax credits. So that's only enough to live on if you get a top-up from tax credits as well. If you're going to cut tax credits, that's not really a living wage per se, but it is a higher minimum wage.
Critics said the Chancellor's pre-election budget in March lacked detail on how he was going to cut £12 billion from the annual welfare budget. That detail came today, but the pace of the cuts are being slowed, as recommended by the OECD, smoothing the path of austerity from that outlined in the March budget.
Some of it is with regard to tax credits and changing taper rates and changing the rates at which that applies, so it doesn't go quite so far up the income scale. It's also the case that for future claims we will be making some changes with the employment support allowance, some changes in terms of the child element of tax credits, so that will be for a maximum of 2 children. We are setting it out over a longer time frame than we originally planned. We're able to smooth the path to that. There's some tough measures there, but I think they are well balanced. I think they're reasonable.
The Tories claim that they're now the Workers' Party in the United Kingdom. But with that said, perhaps the biggest political challenge of this budget was justifying the £12 billion in cuts to the working age poor.
The Chancellor had failed his own test for the budget before he'd even sat down. So on productivity, we know from the OBR that actually productivity is going to go down in each year of this Parliament. And the Chancellor, who says that now he's all about working people, I think showed that actually working people are worse off under him because of the huge changes that he's made to tax credits today, where 3 million working families, people trying to do the right thing, are going to be £4.5 billion worse off.
Today was the moment, I think, when we saw George Osborne's pitch to be Prime Minister. This was the moment where he said, I am the man to take over from David Cameron. He was able to move rightwards on things like defence and welfare, and to the left on things like low pay. And that is very significant. He needs to get that broad consensus of voters to vote for him if he wants to take over from David Cameron. One of the most significant announcements was that living wage announcement, because it's something that Boris Johnson has supported in the past, which is going to be one of the main issues when the leadership campaign to come. So by spiking Boris Johnson's gun today, not only did he prove himself as Chancellor, but he helped prove himself as a leader in waiting.
The Conservatives no longer have to haggle with a coalition partner, and they face an opposition Labour Party still licking its wounds after defeat in the general election. Mr Osborne is a Chancellor at the start of his second term, and from a position of strength, he rolled back the state in what he calls a one-nation budget. Daniel Garrahan, Financial Times, London.